This video was brought to you by CuriosityStream. In mid-September, Iranians took to the streets to protest the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old girl who was apparently killed by Iran's so-called morality police, a parallel police force responsible for enforcing Islamic social norms that has been re-empowered by Iran's new ultra-conservative president, Ebrahim Raisi. While Iran has seen regular protests for the last decade or so, these protests, spearheaded by young Iranian women living in urban areas, have lasted far longer than usual, and the regime is struggling to shut them down as it's done in the past. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at how the protests have spread across Iran, why the regime has found it hard to put them out, and why, even if these protests aren't the immediate cause, it's become increasingly clear that the Ayatollah regime is living on borrowed time. So the first thing to say is that we've actually done a video on this topic before, back in mid-September, when the protests first began. You might not have seen it before because YouTube deemed it age restricted. So if you want to know more about some of the history behind Iran's current political system, go have a watch. For those of you that can't be bothered, the point that we made at the beginning of that video is that while Iran is a Muslim majority country run by an ultra-conservative Ayatollah regime, Iranian civil society is actually more moderate than you might expect. The Ayatollahs came to power after the Iranian Revolution in 1979, not because everyone loved them, but because Ayatollah Khomeini had become the figurehead of the revolution, which was animated by apathy towards the ruling Reza Shah, an Iranian monarchist installed via a military group in the 50s, which was actually organised by the CIA. Somewhat unsurprisingly, he was widely perceived as an American puppet, and he wasn't that popular with ordinary Iranians, hence the 1979 revolution. But while Ayatollah Khomeini became its figurehead, the anti-Shah movement originally included everyone from communists to secularists to Islamic moderates. While the Ayatollahs seized power, however, they quickly purged any moderates and staged mass executions of political opponents. Now, that's not to say that the Ayatollahs are unpopular per se. Some fraction of Iranian society, especially in rural areas, agree with their ultra-conservative Islamism, but they definitely don't enjoy universal support, especially amongst younger, more urban Iranians. Since they took power in 1979, the Ayatollahs have suppressed opposition via violence and intimidation. However, in the last decade or so, Iranian living standards have collapsed, and protests have become a regular feature of Iranian politics. Economic mismanagement and Western sanctions have crippled the Iranian economy, and GDP per capita is down about 70% from its 2012 peak, and lower than what it was when the Ayatollahs came to power in 1979. Inflation is running at 50%, youth unemployment hovers somewhere between 20 and 30%, and the country suffers from regular water shortages, partly caused by the government's decision to redirect water from Iran's poorer western regions towards its wealthier central regions. The most recent protests were triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old woman who was apparently killed by Iran's morality police for failing to cover all of her hair with her hijab, as is required by the Ayatollah's interpretation of Sharia. Amini was detained by the police on September the 13th, before dying in suspicious circumstances 3 days later. Iranian authorities claim she died of a heart attack, but her family insist that she was in good health. Protests began in Saqqez, the town where she was buried, but quickly spread out to every province in Iran. It's now been nearly a month, and protests are still ongoing, concentrated mostly in urban areas and in educational institutes. The government has tried to stem the protests by cutting off internet in affected areas, but content is still coming out, and some of the videos are truly astounding. Teenage girls in Iranian schools have been waving their headscarves at furious government officials and chanting "Death to the dictator," which has become the rallying cry for anti-Ayatollah protests over the last few years. Despite a vicious crackdown by security services at Sharif University last week, protesters at universities across Iran have continued, with students demanding a vote on the Ayatollah's rule. These protests hark back to the 1979 revolution, where women actually played a pivotal role. Before he took power, Ayatollah Khomeini credited women for their involvement in the revolution and claimed that he considered men and women to be equals. Obviously, once he came to power, he didn't really follow through on this, banning women from holding office and imposing an ultra-conservative and deeply sexist version of Sharia law upon the country. Anyway, so what happens next? Well, while a few people have died in the unrest, so far the authorities have refrained from the sort of massive violence they usually deploy to stem protests. Instead, they've limited internet connectivity and blamed foreign powers, specifically the US and Israel. This is probably because, well, even a totalitarian regime like Iran can't get away with gunning down teenage girls. While the regime's imminent collapse looks unlikely, largely because the protests are mostly student-led, if more significant constituencies step up, people like merchants, reformists, politicians and moderate clerics, they'll be under significant pressure. Even if the regime survive this round of protests, recent history suggests that new ones will follow. As things stand, it increasingly looks like the Ayatollah's regime is living on borrowed time, and it's hard to see how they'll survive the death of the ruling Ayatollah Khomeini, who's now 83 and apparently not in great shape. Well, that's all pretty miserable. If you want cheering up, then we have a bunch of fun videos too, like our team attempting the British citizenship test, our blooper reel.
On Wednesday, Peru's Prime Minister, oh God, I'm just going to ask next door, I'll be back. Turns out there's a bunch of useless next door.
Our office tour and our interview with TV expert Scott Bryan about why Piers Morgan and Talk TV are failing. All of those videos are exclusive to the streaming service we made with our creator friends, Nebula. Now, don't worry, I know times are tough, and that's why it's good that Nebula is about $1 a month if you sign up to the Nebula Curiosity Stream bundle. Here's how it works. We reached out to the good old chaps at CuriosityStream and said, hey, you have a superb streaming service full of some of the most high quality documentaries available online. You want to team up? They emailed back saying, you mean highest quality? But sure. Now, I don't always appreciate pedantry, but they're right, and they put forward an offer we couldn't refuse. They said that anyone who signed up to their streaming service using this link, it's in the description, don't worry, would also get access to Nebula totally free. Now, I like free things, so we said yes. So if you click the link below, you'll pay less than $15 a year for CuriosityStream and Nebula. That's just over $1 a month. So get yourself exclusive TLDR videos, which will never come to YouTube, all our videos ad-free, and some videos earlier than they come out to YouTube. Sign up now. For legal reasons, this exchange is entirely fictional, and I honestly don't know how the deal was done. I'm not a legal kind of guy, so I wasn't in the room when it happened. Also, just because I made this up doesn't mean the videos aren't true. Everything else I say is 100% accurate, okay? Regardless, you should sign up.